So every time I try to record, this little one is in front of the door howling. That's why sometimes I have to stop recording and give her some attention. This is Zelda. She's very naughty, right? Yeah. Can Daddy make some recording and then give you pets? Yeah? Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to throw you out now, huh? Yeah. Vigorous Steve here with, you guessed it, some more blood work results. It's the end of the month after all, and of course I do my blood work every single month. So here I am sharing the results with you guys to get some fundamental insight to my blood work parameters and see what's going on within my body. Now, first things first, let's get that giveaway out of the way, because last week I mentioned, or I asked you guys what you would expect my total testosterone concentrations to end up at after a month on a cruise of 156 milligrams testosterone enanthate administered 78 milligrams Monday and 78 milligrams Friday, keeping in mind that I'm running 250 IUs ACG 3 times per week, and the hormones, which I was administering for 4 months subcutaneously, would be self-tapering. So I give you guys a little bit of a heads up. I would expect my total testosterone levels to end up around 1100, 1200 nanograms per deciliter, but myself, including everybody else, had that totally wrong. My total testosterone ended up at 843.45 nanograms per deciliter. Much lower than expected, but I certainly don't feel that way. I don't feel like I'm on around 800 nanograms per deciliter. Personally, I feel that I'm at least 1,000. But then again, we don't just treat the numbers on paper, we treat the patient. That's why I always feel it's important to write a little bit of a diary before going in for blood work and write down how you feel, how your workouts have been, how your libido is, how your sense of well-being is, your mood, etc. Because you can't always go with the numbers on paper. Sometimes they're a little bit off, or worse or better than expected. So it's important to write down how you feel, look at your productivity. If you feel a little bit off, try to pinpoint and confirm that with blood work, which you'll do later on that day. But in my case, I feel and look like my serum testosterone levels are around 1,000, maybe even 1,200 nanograms per deciliter, but the results on paper are only 843. So I didn't get it right, and nobody else got it right. The closest that people got were assuming that I was at 900 nanograms per deciliter. So I'm not greedy. I'm still going to do a giveaway, even though nobody got it correct. Bojan Milanov guessed that I was going to be around 900 nanograms per deciliter, and so did Make It Pop and Training Addict. So you three, please contact me on Instagram or send me an email. I'll ask you to post a particular code on your YouTube page on the comment section so I can verify that it's you guys. And then I'll activate those ebooks for you so you can get to reading and learn a little bit more about bioidentical hormones and how to use them safely. And guys, please do me a solid, like the video, comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Much appreciated. Let's get into the blood work results, starting with this cruise or bridge. It's a little bit of semantics, because it's not exactly a TRT dose, because I had insulin the last 2 weeks to help restore some fullness. And it's only been a month, right? A cruise is supposed to be 2 or 3 months, enough time to really improve your blood work parameters, detox, clean out, etc. But a month I would rather label as a bridge, because again, I was on cycle for 4 months. Some of the hormones that I took at the end of September are probably still self-tapering. Testosterone enanthate, primobolan enanthate, nandrolone decanoate, masterone enanthate, all taken subcutaneously. Judging from my blood work parameters, I would say that many of those compounds or some of their metabolites are still active within my system. So let's not call it a cruise, even though the dose of testosterone enanthate was quite low. Let's just call it a bridge. 156 milligrams of test enanthate, 250 IUs ACG 3 times per week, 37.5 milligrams DHEA per day, 12.5 milligrams pregnenolone per day, 10 to 12 IUs Lantus long-acting insulin, and 500 milligrams injectable carnitine before fasted cardio and 5 times per week before the workouts. That was my protocol for the last month. So since I didn't get an opportunity to share my previous results with you guys because I got a little bit too busy, and again, the results of September 25th were not that exciting, so I didn't make a dedicated video for those results. I'm going to mix them in with this blood work results and give you guys a head-on-head comparison of what my results were at the end of the 4-month cycle at 1,000 milligrams steroids per week and a couple goodies on top. And now after a month on a bridging protocol, which I just discussed. On my urinalysis, both were pretty much the same. Specific gravity yesterday was 1.003 with a pH of 6. All of my other urinalysis results were in normal parameters. So we know that I'm accurately hydrated. And it's the same case for the previous results at the end of September. There I was also sufficiently hydrated. My white blood cell count increased slightly with 5.5%. From 4,950 to 5,220 cells per cubic millimeter. This is a slight increase because my hormone levels came down. Again, if you want your white blood cell counts to be a little bit in the middle of the range, let's say 6,000, 7,000 cells per cubic millimeter, then you would need to come off cycle. If you're on steroids, in many cases, or in the large majority of the cases, what I see on my blood work and everybody else's blood work is that white blood cell counts tend to shift down towards the reference range, sometimes even below the reference range, as low as 4,000 cells per cubic millimeter, which is not alarming. It's just a normal side effect of being on anabolic androgenic steroids. And of course, if you see your white blood cell count over the reference range, it's pretty safe to say that you have an infection going on. So that's not the case here. Hemoglobin came down with about 10% from 17.5 to 15.8. Grams per deciliter, again, a month ago, it was towards the top of the reference range. But now that I went on a bridging protocol, I think some of the hematocrit came down, which came down with 10%, 53 to 48%, because there's less erythropoietic activity in the kidneys and the bone marrow as the hormone levels started to taper down. So you see that over this course of a month, hemoglobin came down with about 10%, hematocrit came down with about 10%, and red blood cell count came down with about 7%. Now I'm at 5.27 million cells per cubic millimeter. So all in all, I would say that my complete blood count is within good parameters to ramp up the dose yet again. What I am surprised about is that my red cell distribution width went from 12.9% to 15%, which is an increase of 16.3%. Now that could be due to several different reasons. Again, I fasted for a week, somewhere in the middle of the second phase of the cycle, so that's a couple weeks ago, which leads to autophagy of the aged red blood cells. Again, I shifted my PED protocol and I reintroduced beef to my diet on a daily basis, whereas previously I would have beef maybe once or twice per week. And now for the last month, I've been having 200 grams of beef, 8 ounces of beef every single day, which obviously increases your iron intake, as you'll see from my serum iron levels, as well as your B vitamin intake. Again, I'm supplementing with B vitamins, so I'm not exactly sure how much additional B vitamins I'm getting from the beef on top of my supplementation protocol, but my iron intake has definitely increased. So what I suspect is that due to the fasting, some of the aged red blood cells have been destroyed through autophagy, and then the new red blood cells which are being produced in a less erythropoietic state because the hormone levels declined, but also in a state where there's more iron. I feel that the new red blood cells contain more hemoglobin, more iron compared to the ones previously. But again, the red cell distribution with it doesn't exactly show you if there's more smaller red blood cells or larger red blood cells. In this case, you just see that there's a bigger difference between the smaller and the bigger red blood cells. Again, if I go back on cycle, this red cell distribution width will slowly come back down into range, around 12 or 13%. I'm not worried. It's just something that I noted when I was looking at these blood work results. Everything else is pretty much normal within range. Let's move over to the blood chemistry. Glucose pretty much the same, 71 milligrams per deciliter. Blood urea and nitrogen increased from 24.5 to 27.1 milligrams per deciliter. And it's only by adding more beef to my diet. So previously on a pescatarian diet, consisting predominantly of fish, eggs, and beef here or there, my blood urea or nitrogen was around 22, let's say 25 milligrams per deciliter. Eating more beef on a daily basis increased my blood urea nitrogen. And I had to go back through my previous blood work results where I was eating a lot of beef and I saw the exact same thing. So I think that's slightly correlated. Again, time will tell as I'm removing the beef from my diet and maybe go back to once a week, twice a week when I go back on cycle to see if my blood urea nitrogen will come back down within the reference range and probably ends up at the top of the reference range around 24, 25 milligrams per deciliter. Creatinine came down slightly from 1.38 to 1.27 milligrams per deciliter. Again, I would have to lose more muscle mass and train less intensely for this to come back down within the reference range. Still, it's a decrease of 8%. Uric acid came down slightly from 5.5 to 4.8 milligrams per deciliter, a reduction of 13%. Creatine phosphokinase was sky high at the end of September because I was training quite heavily, more heavy than I should have. But, you know, when you're on a gram of gear, you kind of want to train hard all freaking day long. My creatine phosphokinase was 3,654, came down with 56% to 1,612 units per liter. And again, I'm not training that hard as I was a month ago, nor am I running clenbuterol, which is also known to increase your creatine phosphokinase levels quite substantially. High sensitivity C-reactive protein a month ago was 1.2 milligrams per liter, and now it's 0.7 milligrams per liter. So even though the numbers are quite small, close together, it's still a reduction of 42%. Cholesterol came down with 27%, total cholesterol that is, 134 to 98 milligrams per deciliter. Triglycerides from 25 to 23, so that's pretty much the same. HDL from 36 came up with 20% to 43 milligrams per deciliter. And LDL came down from 88 to 46 milligrams per deciliter. So that's a huge reduction. And it's also because I took the Anavar out. Again, I increased the Anavar to about 10 milligrams per day. Anavar can have a substantial effect on your lipid parameters. And of course, when you're taking 1,000 milligrams of steroids per week, your lipids are going to skew nonetheless. So even though the diet is pretty much the same with the inclusion of beef, since then, the daily fasted cardio hasn't changed. The fish oil with every meal hasn't changed. The citrus bergamot hasn't changed. Just the removal of a substantial dose of steroids, particularly the Anavar, and adding a little bit of beef, my lipid parameters have improved substantially. Regarding the liver markers, most of my markers are in range. What is of note is that my total and direct bilirubin have increased quite a bit. My total bilirubin at the end of September was 0.42 milligrams per deciliter. And now, a month on a bridge with less erythropoietic activity, again, bilirubin is a metabolic waste product of hemoglobin metabolism, which comes from the red blood cells. It has increased with 74% to 0.73 milligrams per deciliter. And direct bilirubin has increased slightly less, with 46% from 0.22 to 0.32 milligrams per deciliter. So it could be that there's a slight issue with glucuronidase recycling. The direct bilirubin, the conjugated bilirubin, has been marked for excretion by attaching glucuronic acid to the bilirubin. Now I would expect total bilirubin and direct bilirubin to increase at the same percentage, but in this case, total bilirubin increased more compared to direct bilirubin. So it could be that there's a little bit of recycling within the intestinal tract. There's glucuronidase, which recycles the glucuronic acid from the bilirubin and other hormones which are marked for excretion, and then allows the enterohepatic recirculation to reabsorb the bilirubin and potentially other toxins. So for the next month or so, I'll introduce 1,000 milligrams calcium diglucarate upon waking, and again, 1,000 milligrams calcium diglucarate before bed, 2,000 milligrams per day, as well as hydrolyzed casein protein, which contains compounds which inhibit the glucuronidase enzymes within the intestinal tract and prevent the recycling of conjugated bilirubin, allowing it to be reabsorbed. So this is a good detoxification method, calcium diglucarate and hydrolyzed casein protein. I'll run that for a month, and I'll expect my total and direct bilirubin levels to come down and hopefully excrete more metabolic waste products, which are excreted with the glucuronidase process. Alkaline phosphatase, total protein, albumin, globulin, those are all within normal parameters, as is gamma GT. My liver enzymes, the AST came down with 40% from 85 to 52 units per liter, and my ALT liver enzymes also came down with about 40%, 72 to 44 units per liter. Again, I removed the Anavar, no oral steroids, I reduced my training intensity, I stay on top of my fiber intake and my TUDCA intake. I'm going to expect these liver enzymes to come right back up as I'm gearing up the next couple of weeks, but I will leave the oral steroids out just to have a little bit of a break from oral steroids or other pharmacological interventions which are passing through my liver, because I do expect to have a little bit of alcohol here and there when I'm in the States. So I'm going to take all of the unnecessary pressure off my liver for the next couple of weeks. So I have a little bit of a buffer and wiggle room so I can misbehave while I'm on holiday. Now, as I mentioned before, since I increased my beef intake, my serum iron has increased with 150%, 82 to 204 micrograms per deciliter, which is out of the reference range. Of course, I could supplement with IP6, which is known to inhibit iron absorption. Maybe that's a good idea now. All right, I keep my diet the same, keep adding in the beef, 200 grams per day, but use supplemental IP6 with each serving of beef to inhibit iron absorption. I will still take 6,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day for its overall antioxidant benefits and help as a collagen donor in the collagen building process within the body. So again, keep in mind that vitamin C is known to increase iron absorption, but IP6 is known to inhibit it. So what I can do, if you guys would like to see this experiment over the next couple of weeks, I'll have beef with IP6, skip the vitamin C with those servings, and then see how much of an effect that would have on my serum iron levels, my ferritin, and my overall hematocrit and red blood cell count. Let me know down below in the comment section. Ferritin also increased with 135% from 110 to 258 nanograms per milliliter, so that's a steep increase. Ferritin did increase slightly less than serum iron. Keep in mind that some of this iron could also come from the red blood cells, which were being destroyed. Again, hemoglobin metabolizes into bilirubin and releases its iron content. It's the iron that actually helps to bind oxygen and delivers that to metabolically active tissue that needs oxygen for metabolic processes. Moving over to the cardiac markers, which unfortunately for me have worsened again. Last time I checked my cardiac markers, they were getting progressively better, very close to the respective reference ranges. And now, after another bout with Flurona, they're bad again. Great. So I'm not exactly sure what's worse now, the Vax or the Flurona. My CKMB has increased from 12.4 to 24.3 nanograms per milliliter. So that's the heart-specific creatine phosphokinase. Now, the good thing here is that right before I got Flurona a couple of weeks ago, after retesting my blood work parameters on September 25th, my creatine phosphokinase was close to 4,000. But my CKMB, the heart-specific creatine phosphokinase, was quite low. And now my CPK is much lower, but my CKMB is much higher. Man, you can't win. I didn't check my NT-proBNP because those have been in range for the last 3 years. I haven't really seen that NT-proBNP off at any point in time. So I didn't feel the reason to retest that, but I will do that at the end of November, just to see where NT-proBNP marker currently is at. My high sensitivity troponin T level was 0.015 nanograms per milliliter, so that's slightly over the reference range on September 25th. And after getting Flurona again, it increased with 113% to 0.032 nanograms per milliliter. Well, at least my troponin I on the high sensitivity test decreased yet again, from 5.2, so that's within the reference range, down to 4.3 picograms per milliliter. So some are good, some are bad. And then moving over to the final results of the day, the sex hormones. Let me know in the comment section if you use the timestamps to skip ahead. I know many of you guys do. You only care about the sex hormones. Beta ACG, 12.5 milli-IUs per milliliter because I injected 250 IUs ACG about an hour before going in for blood work just to check if this IPSA brand of Coriomon or Pregnil, I alternate between both brands, if that is legit. So far so good. 250 IUs is keeping my testicle and its functions sustained. Estradiol came down with about 60%, 52.3 to 21.5 picograms per milliliter. So even though my testosterone levels declined with 47%, my estradiol levels came down with 59%. And that's probably because the primobolan and the masterone are still active within my body, acting as a reversely binding aromatase inhibitor. So even though I reduced the testosterone dose because the primobolan and masterone dosages were substantially higher a month ago, they keep continuously suppressing my aromatization. Now, I don't feel necessarily bad with an estradiol of 21.5. Neither did I feel bad with an estradiol of 52.3 picograms per milliliter. If anything, I feel exactly the same. Just as energetic, just as lively, and just as good libido. So nothing wrong there. Again, I reduced the ACG dose from 500 IUs to 250 IUs 3 times per week. And then the testosterone dose came down. But due to the suppression of aromatization of the primobolan and the masterone, the estradiol came down substantially more compared to the testosterone. Progesterone the same, 0.1 nanograms per milliliter. I didn't recheck my prolactin levels, which were 7.15 nanograms per milliliter on September 25th. Total testosterone came down 47% with 1,590 to 840 nanograms per deciliter, give or take. Free testosterone came down 50%. Don't feel a difference at all. 59.3 to 27.6 nanograms per deciliter. Bioavailable testosterone came down with 53%. Exact same number. 1,422 to 663 nanograms per deciliter. Because SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, increased from 8.7 to 13 nanomoles per liter, which is an increase of about 50%. So that's good to see. Again, removing all of the anabolic androgenic steroids, especially the primobolan and masterone, which is still active but less active than a month ago. SHBG was able to increase with 50%. Not a dramatic increase, but an increase nonetheless. Will I be able to sustain it? Probably not. I think over the next 6 weeks, SHBG will come down probably below 12, 11, 10 nanomoles per liter. I'm not going to take any torkesterone or ecdysterone to keep that artificially increased. Neither will I take selective estrogen receptor modulators. I'm just going to go with the flow, and whatever my SHBG ends up at, that's where it's going to be. I won't be using any Proviron to crush it any further, because Proviron is fucking useless. DHEA sulfate, pretty much the same, an increase of 3%, 525 to 539 micrograms per deciliter. All I need to do at this point in time is sustain what I have. I need to be a little bit fuller, need to be a little bit rounder and a little bit stronger, but I'm not going to train balls to the wall and taking all these sets past failure. So I'm just going to train maybe a rep short of failure and not do any grinder reps, where you're shaking and trying to get that weight all the way to the top. I'm not going to do that because it takes away from my productivity, as I mentioned to you guys many, many times before. But I always end up grinding my socks off. Okay, I'll leave it here. So all in all, I would say that my blood work parameters are actually quite favorable at the end of my 4-month cycle, as well as at the end of this 1-month bridge. At the end of the 4-month cycle, I think the most noticeable thing was that the creatine phosphokinase was quite high. And again, my training intensity went up. So my CPK and my liver enzymes were a little bit higher than expected. I'm going to make some changes to that cycle going forward. And the most noticeable thing that I see at the end of this bridge is that my serum iron levels are quite high. And again, you guys let me know if you would like to see an experiment with IP6, how much of an effect that would have on my red blood cell count and my serum iron levels, as well as my ferritin levels. So the cardiac markers worsened, obviously, because, I got flurona again, and my serum iron levels went up, but everything else kind of improved, except for my testosterone levels. Well, that's to be expected when you're doing a bridge. So going forward, for the next 5 weeks, the protocol is going to be pretty much the same as where I left off a month ago in September. But instead of doing half amps and quarter amps, I'm just going to go with a full amp, a whopping full amp of Bayer testosterone. I'm kind of tired of doing the transfers from an ampule, storing a quarter ampule or half an ampule of testosterone in a sterile vial and then using that the next week. I'm just going to prepare a week's worth of injections in advance, transferring the amps or homebrew to a sterile vial. So that's going to be 1 whole amp of Bayer testosterone, about 325 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. Again, these ampules are overfilled. I get about 1.2, 1.3 milliliters out of every single Bayer ampule. So I'm rounding that to, the middle of about 325 milligrams test enanthate from every ampule. Same with the Bayer Rimabolin. I'm going to use 3 full ampules of Bayer Rimabolin, 375 milligrams methanolone enanthate, 50 milligrams nandrolone decanoate homebrew, I didn't really notice a difference between 50 milligrams nandrolone and 100 milligrams nandrolone. I did notice a difference from no nandrolone to 50 milligrams nandrolone per week. So I guess that's my sweet spot. The only thing that I noticed is that 100 milligrams, again, this is kind of splitting hairs, that 100 milligrams nandrolone was thickening my skin slightly, got a little bit more rigid, additional collagen synthesis through the progesterone receptor perhaps. I didn't really get that on 50 milligrams of nandrolone, so that's my sweet spot. Enough for joint relief. Again, my knees are not 100%, but they're now 90, 95%. 50 milligrams of nandrolone should get the job done. 200 milligrams drostanolone enanthate, also home brew, so that brings the total injection volume to 6 milliliters per week, or 0.857, 0.8 milliliters per day. Total anabolic androgenic steroid intake is going to be 950 milligrams per week for the next 5 weeks. I won't be using any Anavar. I might change my mind at the end, last 2 weeks leading into going on holiday where I feel that I need a little bit more pop to my physique. But for now, that's going to be the protocol. DHA and pregnenolone will stay the same. ACG will increase to 500 IUs 3 times per week. I feel that it's a little bit more favorable on a dose of steroids that is, creeping up to 1,000 milligrams per week. I won't be using any growth hormone simply because I ran out and I don't want the additional bloat. So no growth hormone for the next 5 weeks. I will use long-acting insulin 10 to 12 IUs upon waking. Maybe I should do a separate video about that, the use of insulin without growth hormone. Just keep in mind that I've used, thousands of units of growth hormone in my day. So keep that also in mind. I'll use liraglutide, Saxenda, maybe 0.6 to 1.25 milligrams as needed. Right now, I'm not that hungry, but I'm sure as I'm ramping up the dose and the training intensity and the cardio is coming back in, at a higher intensity, I'm sure the appetite will come up as well. And then I will suppress that with liraglutide as needed. I will restart the mitochondrial support stack, which consists of 250 milligrams NAD+, 800 milligrams glutathione, 5,000 milligrams injectable vitamin C, a B100 complex, 500 milligrams nicotinamide mononucleotides per day. And at one point, I will reintroduce 5 milligrams MOTS-C, but I think for the next 2 weeks, I will just see how I feel on NAD+ by itself, which I haven't used for the last couple of months now, 3 months. I haven't used it, give or take. So I want to see how I feel on NAD+ on top of the glutathione, vitamin C, and everything else that I was doing before I reintroduce the MOTS-C and see how much of an additional benefit that is on top of the NAD+. And then I will provide the mitochondrial support stack for you guys. The usual protocol, 50 milligrams modafinil, 20 micrograms clenbuterol, 100 micrograms T4. I stopped the T3 a month ago. I felt that I was not getting so much benefit out of it, so why run it if it's not really contributing that much besides clammy hands? 3 milligrams ribulsine to help with a little bit of fat loss. I will continue with the carnitine and swap that in and out for the aminoasylum Stampede and the aminoasylum Super Shredder, which I'll do a separate video on. So I might do 1 cc Stampede or 2 cc Stampede and half a cc Super Shredder, or 1 cc of each or half a cc of each, right? Depending on the body part and how much pump and how much additional fat loss I want. And regarding the ancillaries, same as usual, 5 milligrams nebivolol, 10 milligrams ezetimibe, and 40 milligrams telmisartan, which is the only compound I took out the last month while I was bridging. I don't feel that I need telmisartan when I'm following a cruise dose or a bridge dose, TRT dose. I get enough blood pressure management from the nebivolol and proper electrolyte intake. So that's the only compound I switch in and out while I'm increasing the dose. But I forgot to mention that while I was bridging, I was still taking 5 milligrams nebivolol and 10 milligrams ezetimibe. You can find all of the health monitoring devices that I recommend for you guys to purchase if you're into enhanced bodybuilding. You can find them down below in the YouTube description section. Head over to Amazon with its respective Amazon link. All of the companies that I personally work with, you can find in the YouTube description section as well. If you're looking for something specific, just head over to my website, vigorsteve.com. I got a ton of different articles covering all kinds of different things which are related to bodybuilding or anti-aging, longevity, keeping yourself healthy, how to interpret blood work results, how to structure your training. Man, there's so much information on my website besides this YouTube channel, vigoroussteve.com. Bookmark it. Do yourself a favor. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys doesn't look like 840 nanograms per deciliter to me. But hey, the numbers on paper don't lie, even though I feel like I'm at least 1200, maybe even more. I kind of feel pretty freaking good. For the guys that are looking for a place to do blood work, if you're in the United States, look no further than Merrick Health. I have 2 personalized blood work panels. One that's a complete and full comprehensive blood work panel, the Vigorous Steve Lab panel. And there's also a budget panel, which is a little bit smaller, a little bit more cost effective. Needless to say, the discount code Vigorous will get you 10% off. So if you're looking for a place to do blood work in the United States, Merrick Health has got you covered. And if you need somebody to interpret your blood work results, they have excellent patient care coordinators who can help you get healthy in a hurry. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.